Some moments in television history transcend the boundaries of entertainment and remind us why human connection remains more valuable than any prize or accolade. On a Thursday afternoon in March 2024, Family Feud was recording what the production team anticipated would be a standard episode filled with laughter, competition, and the familiar warmth that had made the show a cornerstone of American television for decades. The studio audience was engaged and enthusiastic. Two families stood ready to compete with the spirited energy that contestants typically bring to game shows. Steve Harvey prepared to guide them through questions and answers with his characteristic blend of humor and genuine interest in the people standing before him. However, one contestant was carrying news so devastating that when she finally gathered the courage to share it during the taping, the revelation would stop production entirely, move everyone present to tears, and ultimately demonstrate that sometimes the most important moments on television have nothing to do with winning games or answering questions correctly. What transpired in those extraordinary minutes proved that compassion and human dignity must always take precedence over entertainment and ratings. If you value authentic moments of grace and humanity in media, please take a moment to support this channel by clicking the like button and subscribing. The story you are about to experience demonstrates why genuine empathy remains one of the most powerful forces in human interaction. Rebecca Martinez was 41 years old and had been married to her husband Daniel for 18 years. They lived in a modest home in Sacramento, California, where Daniel worked as a high school mathematics teacher and Rebecca managed the administrative operations for a small nonprofit organization focused on literacy education. Together they had raised two children, 14-year-old Sophia and 12-year-old Miguel, in a household characterized by warmth, laughter, and the kind of ordinary happiness that forms the foundation of a good life. To anyone observing the Martinez family, they represented the best of what families could be: loving, supportive, engaged with their community, and committed to creating opportunities for their children that would allow them to thrive. Rebecca had grown up in a working-class family in the Central Valley of California. Her parents had immigrated from Mexico before she was born, bringing with them a powerful work ethic and an unwavering commitment to education as the pathway to opportunity. Her father had worked in agriculture while her mother cleaned houses, and both had sacrificed enormously to ensure that Rebecca and her siblings could attend good schools and pursue their dreams without the limitations they themselves had faced. Rebecca had absorbed these values deeply, understanding from an early age that education and hard work could transform circumstances and create possibilities that might otherwise remain out of reach. She had met Daniel during their junior year at Sacramento State University. He had been studying mathematics education, driven by a desire to make abstract concepts accessible to students who struggled with quantitative reasoning. Rebecca had been pursuing a degree in nonprofit management, motivated by a commitment to addressing educational inequities in underserved communities. They had connected immediately, recognizing in each other a shared set of values and a common vision for building a life centered on meaningful work and family. Their relationship had developed naturally into a partnership characterized by mutual respect, genuine affection, and aligned priorities. Daniel had secured a position teaching at a public high school in a neighborhood where many students came from families facing significant economic challenges. He loved his work despite the frustrations inherent in teaching in an underfunded system. He stayed late to provide extra help to students who needed it. He sponsored the math club and coached the academic decathlon team. He believed deeply that education could change trajectories, and he invested himself fully in making that belief a reality for the young people in his classroom. His students respected him not only for his knowledge, but for his genuine care about their success and well-being. Rebecca's work at the literacy nonprofit allowed her to contribute to educational equity in a different way. She managed the organization's partnerships with schools, coordinated volunteer tutors, and oversaw the programs that provided books and reading support to children in low-income communities. The work was meaningful but challenging, particularly given the limited resources available to organizations serving populations with the greatest needs. Rebecca often worked long hours for modest compensation, driven not by financial incentives, but by the knowledge that the programs she managed were making genuine differences in children's lives. The Martinez family lived carefully within their means. Daniel's teacher salary and Rebecca's nonprofit income provided enough to cover their expenses and save modestly, but there was little room for luxury or significant financial cushion. They purchased used cars and maintained them for as long as possible. They shopped at discount stores and clipped coupons. They took vacations locally rather than flying to distant destinations. However, they also prioritized experiences that enriched their family life: museum memberships, library visits, hiking in nearby state parks, and regular family dinners where everyone shared stories about their days. Sophia and Miguel were thriving academically and socially, growing into thoughtful young people who understood both the value of hard work and the importance of contributing to their community. 6 months before the Family Feud taping, Daniel began experiencing symptoms that concerned him. He felt unusually fatigued, developed persistent headaches, and noticed occasional difficulty with coordination that seemed inconsistent with his typically active lifestyle. As a dedicated teacher who prided himself on never missing work, Daniel initially attributed these symptoms to stress and the demanding nature of his job during a particularly challenging semester. He told himself that he simply needed to rest more and manage his workload better. However, as weeks passed and the symptoms intensified rather than improving, Rebecca insisted that he see a physician for evaluation. The initial appointment led to additional tests, which led to referrals to specialists, which eventually culminated in imaging studies that revealed the devastating truth. Daniel had a brain tumor. The medical team explained that it was a glioblastoma, an aggressive form of cancer with a poor prognosis. They recommended surgery followed by radiation and chemotherapy, though they were careful to emphasize that even with aggressive treatment, the survival rates for this type of cancer were discouraging. The median survival time was measured in months rather than years. The diagnosis shattered the Martinez family's world. Rebecca and Daniel sat in the neurologist's office, holding hands while the doctor explained treatment options and statistical outcomes, and they struggled to process information that seemed incompatible with the life they had been building together. Daniel was only 43 years old. He coached soccer on weekends and ran half-marathons for charity. He had plans to take his family to visit the Grand Canyon the following summer and to teach Miguel to drive when he turned 15. The idea that his time might be measured in months rather than the decades they had assumed stretched before them was simply incomprehensible. They decided not to tell Sophia and Miguel the full severity of the diagnosis immediately. The children knew their father was sick and would need treatment, but Rebecca and Daniel agreed that they needed time to understand the situation themselves before determining how to communicate it to adolescents who were still forming their understanding of mortality and loss. They wanted to protect their children from fear and grief for as long as possible, while also being honest enough that the eventual truth would not feel like a complete betrayal of trust. Daniel underwent surgery to remove as much of the tumor as safely possible. The operation was successful in the sense that the surgical team extracted a significant portion of the mass, but they were unable to remove it entirely given its location and infiltration into surrounding brain tissue. Daniel's recovery from surgery was complicated by temporary cognitive effects and coordination challenges that resolved partially, but not completely over the weeks following the procedure. He returned to teaching as soon as medically cleared, determined to maintain as much normalcy as possible and to continue doing the work that gave his life meaning. The radiation and chemotherapy treatments began shortly after his surgical recovery. The side effects were significant and debilitating. Daniel experienced severe fatigue, nausea, and cognitive fog that made even simple tasks challenging. He had to take medical leave from teaching, which was emotionally devastating for him given how central his identity as an educator was to his sense of purpose and self. Rebecca reduced her hours at work to care for him and to manage the household responsibilities that he could no longer handle. The family's careful financial balance began to destabilize as medical bills accumulated and income decreased. Despite the aggressive treatment, follow-up imaging revealed that the tumor was continuing to grow. The oncology team adjusted the treatment protocol, but they were frank with Rebecca and Daniel about the likelihood that they were buying time rather than achieving cure. The conversations shifted from focusing on eliminating the cancer to managing symptoms and maximizing quality of life for whatever time remained. Rebecca found herself navigating an impossible tension between maintaining hope and preparing for loss, between protecting her children from the full weight of what was happening and ensuring they would have opportunities to spend meaningful time with their father before it was too late. It was during this period of treatment and declining hope that Rebecca's sister suggested the family apply to appear on Family Feud. The suggestion initially seemed absurd to Rebecca. How could she possibly focus on a game show when her husband was dying? However, as she considered it further, she began to see potential value in the experience. Daniel loved Family Feud. He watched it regularly and had always talked about how much fun it would be to compete on the show. Perhaps appearing on Family Feud could provide the family with a shared positive experience during a time otherwise dominated by medical appointments and declining health. Perhaps it could create a memory that would sustain them during the difficult times ahead. When Rebecca mentioned the possibility to Daniel, his response was immediate and enthusiastic. Despite his illness, despite the cognitive effects of treatment, despite everything they were facing, the idea of appearing on Family Feud with his family brought genuine joy to his face in a way that Rebecca had not seen in months. They agreed to apply, and Rebecca submitted the application with the support of Daniel's siblings, who would complete their 5-person team. To everyone's surprise and delight, the family was selected to participate in a taping scheduled for March 2024. As the taping date approached, Daniel's condition continued to deteriorate. The tumor was growing despite treatment, and his symptoms were becoming more pronounced. He experienced increased difficulty with speech and movement. His energy was limited to only a few hours of relative functionality each day. The medical team had begun conversations about transitioning to hospice care, though no final decisions had been made. Rebecca agonized over whether they should cancel the Family Feud appearance, whether it was responsible or even possible to proceed given Daniel's condition. However, Daniel insisted that they go forward with the taping. He was determined to create this experience with his family, to give his children this memory of doing something joyful together, even as their world was falling apart. Rebecca consulted with his medical team, who agreed that if Daniel felt capable of participating, the emotional benefit might outweigh the physical challenges. They would need to be prepared to stop at any point if his condition required it, but they would attempt to make this final wish possible. The Martinez family arrived at the studio on the scheduled Thursday morning. Daniel's appearance reflected the toll his illness had taken. He had lost considerable weight, and the effects of radiation had caused hair loss. He moved slowly and with obvious effort. However, his eyes still held determination and warmth, and when he smiled at Rebecca and their children, she could still see the man she had fallen in love with nearly 2 decades earlier. She had made the decision that if the opportunity arose during the taping, she would tell the truth about why they were there and what they were facing. She could not maintain the pretense of normalcy when their reality was so far from normal. She needed people to understand that this was not just another game show appearance, but something much more significant and heartbreaking. The Martinez family stood backstage with their assigned production assistant, who was reviewing the basic procedures and expectations for the taping. Daniel sat in a chair rather than standing, conserving his limited energy for the actual performance. Sophia and Miguel stayed close to their father, their protective instincts evident in how they positioned themselves near him. Daniel's brother Carlos and sister Alina completed their team, both clearly concerned about Daniel's stamina, but committed to supporting whatever he needed to make this experience possible. Their opponents were the Thompson family from Ohio, a friendly and energetic group who brought considerable enthusiasm to the competition. Steve Harvey took the stage to begin the show, and the Martinez family made their way to their positions. Steve noticed immediately that something was different about this family. Daniel's physical condition was evident, and the emotional atmosphere surrounding the Martinez team was more serious than typical contestants displayed. Steve's expression shifted from his usual playful greeting to something more attentive and concerned. The first question asked families to name something people do to celebrate good news. Carlos buzzed in for the Martinez family and answered correctly with, "Call family members," which was the #1 response on the board. The family played the question and answers came steadily. Throw a party, post on social media, go out to dinner. When it was Daniel's turn, he answered slowly but clearly, "Share it with someone you love." The answer was on the board, and the audience applauded. Rebecca watched her husband with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, knowing how much effort it required for him to participate. The Martinez family won the first round, and the game continued. The second question asked about things people wish they had more time for. Alina buzzed in and answered, "Family," which was on the board at #2. As the family played through the question, the answers seemed to carry additional weight given what the Martinez family was experiencing: hobbies, travel, friends, sleep. When Daniel's turn came again, he paused for a long moment before answering, his voice breaking slightly as he said, "Living." Steve Harvey's expression changed. He looked at Daniel with sudden intensity, recognizing that something significant lay beneath this answer. "Living." Steve repeated carefully, "That is a powerful answer, brother. You want to tell me what you mean by that?" Daniel looked at Rebecca, who nodded encouragement. He took a breath and spoke directly to Steve, though his words were meant for everyone present. "I have a terminal brain tumor. The doctors have told me I have weeks, maybe a few months left. I wish I had more time to live with my family, to see my children grow up, to grow old with my wife. Time is the one thing I cannot buy or earn or fight for anymore." The studio fell completely silent. The Thompson family, standing across from them, looked stricken. The audience sat motionless, processing what they had just heard. Steve Harvey stood very still, his characteristic humor entirely absent, replaced by visible emotion and compassion. He set down his cards and walked slowly toward Daniel. "Brother, I am so sorry," Steve said, his voice thick. "I am so sorry for what you are facing, for what your family is going through." He turned to address the production team. "We need to stop taping for a few minutes." The cameras stopped rolling, and Steve approached the Martinez family directly. He spent several minutes speaking with them privately, though microphones captured some of the conversation. He expressed his condolences, asked if they needed anything, and offered to arrange for them to leave if the experience was too difficult. Rebecca spoke up, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Steve, we are here because this was my husband's wish. He loves this show. He wanted to do this with our family before he cannot do anything anymore. We want to continue if that is possible." Steve looked at Daniel, at Sophia and Miguel standing close to their father, at the rest of the family united in their support of Daniel's final wish. He made a decision in that moment that would define the rest of the taping and create one of the most memorable episodes in the show's history. "We are going to continue," Steve announced to everyone present. "However, we are going to do this in a way that honors what this family is facing. This is not just about entertainment anymore. This is about family, about love, and about making a moment matter." He turned back to Daniel. "You came here to do this with your family, and we are going to make sure you get to finish what you started." The taping resumed, but everything had changed. The Thompson family approached the Martinez team during the break and expressed their support and sympathy. They made it clear that while they would continue to compete, they recognized that the outcome of the game mattered far less than the experience the Martinez family was having together. The studio audience, informed during the break about what was happening, created an atmosphere of supportive encouragement rather than typical game show excitement. Steve Harvey adjusted his approach to hosting. He moved more slowly, checked in regularly with Daniel about his stamina, and created space for genuine interaction rather than rushing through questions for the sake of pacing. When it was time for the next question, Steve read it with particular gentleness. "Name something you would want to say to your family if you only had a short time left." The timing of this question, randomly selected from the show's rotation, seemed almost impossible in its relevance to Daniel's situation. Daniel buzzed in without hesitation. "I love you," he said simply. The answer was the #1 response, and as it appeared on the board, Daniel turned to face Rebecca, Sophia, and Miguel directly. "I love you more than I can possibly express. You have been my entire world, and every moment with you has been a gift. I am so grateful for the life we have built together." Sophia and Miguel were crying openly now, and Rebecca put her arms around both children while reaching out to touch Daniel's hand. The game continued through several more rounds, with the Martinez family performing well despite the emotional weight of the circumstances. Steve Harvey guided them with remarkable compassion, knowing when to inject small moments of levity to provide relief, and when to honor the gravity of what they were experiencing. The Thompson family continued to compete genuinely, but clearly wanted the Martinez family to succeed, expressing support whenever possible. The Martinez family ultimately won the main game, earning the right to play fast money for the grand prize. During the break before that final round began, Steve made an unprecedented announcement. He informed the Martinez family that regardless of how they performed in fast money, the show's producers had agreed to award them the full prize money. The experience they were going through transcended the typical rules of competition, and ensuring they received financial support during this devastating time took precedence over standard game show protocols. Daniel insisted on participating in fast money despite his obvious exhaustion. He wanted to complete what he had started. Carlos went first and scored adequately, leaving Daniel to potentially secure enough additional points to reach the target. Daniel approached the podium slowly, and Steve supported him physically to ensure he remained steady. The questions were asked, and Daniel answered each one with careful deliberation, his cognitive processing slowed by his condition but his determination undiminished. When the final scores were revealed, the Martinez family had indeed reached the target score. However, everyone present understood that the numbers were ultimately irrelevant. The real victory was that Daniel had completed this experience with his family, that he had created this final shared memory, and that he had demonstrated to his children what courage and love looked like even in the face of terminal illness. Steve Harvey embraced Daniel carefully, mindful of his fragility. He spoke words that would resonate far beyond that studio. "Daniel, you came here today to do something with your family. You gave them a gift that money cannot buy. You showed your children what it means to keep going even when everything is hard. You loved them out loud. That is the greatest legacy anyone can leave." The Martinez family left the studio that afternoon carrying memories that would sustain them through the difficult weeks ahead. The taping had exhausted Daniel completely, but he expressed profound gratitude for having been able to complete the experience. He told Rebecca that participating in Family Feud with their family had given him a sense of accomplishment and joy during a time when those feelings had become rare. For Sophia and Miguel, the experience provided a tangible memory of their father demonstrating love and determination despite facing the unimaginable. The production team made arrangements to expedite the episode's completion so that Daniel might have the opportunity to see the finished product. They worked with unusual speed to edit and prepare the episode, recognizing that time was a luxury the Martinez family did not possess. 3 weeks after the taping, the family gathered in their living room to watch the episode together. Daniel was in hospice care at that point, his condition having declined significantly. However, he was alert enough to watch the show with Rebecca and the children, to see himself competing alongside his family, and to hear Steve Harvey's words about love and legacy. The episode aired nationally 1 month after the taping. The show's producers had made the decision to include most of what had transpired, including Daniel's revelation about his terminal illness and the emotional moments that followed. They preceded the episode with a content warning and information about resources for families facing similar circumstances. They also included an update informing viewers that Daniel had passed away peacefully in his home, surrounded by family 2 days before the episode aired. The response to the episode was immediate and overwhelming. Millions of viewers watched as Steve Harvey and the Family Feud production team demonstrated what compassionate television could accomplish. People were moved not by dramatic entertainment, but by witnessing genuine humanity and grace during a family's darkest moment. The episode sparked conversations about mortality, about priorities, and about what truly matters when time is limited. Social media filled with messages of support for the Martinez family and praise for how the show had handled such a sensitive situation. Viewers shared their own experiences with terminal illness, expressing gratitude that the episode had honored the reality of what families face when confronting loss. Many people wrote that watching Daniel participate in Family Feud with his family had inspired them to prioritize time with their own loved ones and to stop postponing meaningful experiences. The prize money the Martinez family received provided crucial support during a financially devastating time. Medical bills had accumulated despite insurance coverage, and Rebecca's reduced work hours had strained their already tight budget. The funds allowed Rebecca to take additional time off work to grieve with her children and to address practical matters without immediate financial crisis. More importantly, Daniel had been able to see that his final wish to appear on Family Feud had resulted in tangible support for his family's future. Steve Harvey was profoundly affected by the experience of meeting Daniel and the Martinez family. In subsequent interviews, he spoke extensively about that taping and what it had taught him about the responsibility of having a platform. He emphasized that entertainment should never come at the expense of human dignity and that some moments require setting aside typical procedures to honor what people are experiencing. He established a fund through his foundation to provide financial assistance to families dealing with terminal illness, citing Daniel Martinez as the inspiration for this initiative. The Martinez family appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show 6 months after Daniel's passing to provide an update and to express gratitude for how Family Feud had honored Daniel's final wish. Rebecca spoke eloquently about grief and resilience, about the challenge of moving forward while honoring the past, and about the ways that their Family Feud experience had given them a tangible memory of joy during an otherwise devastating time. Sophia and Miguel, though still clearly grieving, spoke about their father with evident pride and love. They described how watching the episode had become a way for them to feel connected to him and to remember his courage. Rebecca shared something during that appearance that particularly resonated with viewers. She explained that when Daniel was first diagnosed, they had both been paralyzed by fear about how to talk with Sophia and Miguel about death and loss. However, the Family Feud experience had provided an unexpected framework for those conversations. They could talk about the taping, about how their father had participated despite being very sick, about how he had chosen to focus on love and family rather than on fear and loss. The episode became a teaching tool that helped the children process their grief and understand their father's values and priorities. The broader impact of the episode extended beyond the Martinez family's personal experience. Hospice organizations reported increased inquiries from families seeking support in creating meaningful final experiences with terminally ill loved ones. The concept of prioritizing quality of life and meaningful moments over medical interventions gained increased attention in palliative care discussions. Medical professionals began recommending that families consider what activities or experiences might hold significance for patients with limited time remaining, encouraging them to pursue those goals when medically feasible. Educational institutions incorporated the episode into curricula addressing death and dying, using it as an example of how society can acknowledge mortality with honesty and compassion rather than avoidance and discomfort. Psychology programs studying grief and bereavement used the Martinez family's story to illustrate how creating positive final memories can support the grief process for surviving family members. The episode demonstrated that talking openly about terminal illness and death, while painful, could ultimately be more helpful than maintaining pretense or avoiding difficult truths. 1 year after Daniel's death, Rebecca established a small nonprofit organization focused on helping families create meaningful experiences during terminal illness. The organization provided grants to cover costs associated with final wishes, connected families with resources for managing practical and emotional challenges, and offered support groups for children grieving the loss of parents. Rebecca drew on her background in nonprofit management and her personal experience to create an organization that addressed needs she had experienced firsthand during Daniel's illness. The Family Feud episode continued to resonate with audiences long after its initial airing. It was frequently cited in discussions about meaningful television, about the role of media in addressing difficult topics, and about the power of choosing compassion over entertainment value. Television critics noted that the episode had demonstrated how reality television and game shows could serve purposes beyond mere distraction, potentially offering audiences opportunities to witness authentic human experiences that might deepen their own understanding and empathy. 5 years after Daniel's death, the Martinez family had found ways to move forward while continuing to honor his memory. Rebecca had returned to full-time work at the literacy nonprofit and had expanded her leadership role within the organization. Sophia was in college studying to become a teacher, directly inspired by her father's passion for education and his commitment to making knowledge accessible to all students. Miguel was in high school, excelling academically and participating in the math club that his father had once sponsored. Both children carried their father's values forward in tangible ways, demonstrating that his legacy extended far beyond the years he had been physically present. The Family Feud episode remained accessible online, and it continued to be discovered by new viewers facing their own challenges with illness and loss. The comments sections filled with stories from people who had watched the episode during their own difficult times and had found comfort in seeing the Martinez family's experience acknowledged and honored. Many people wrote that the episode had given them permission to prioritize meaningful experiences over maintaining appearances or following conventional timelines. Others expressed gratitude for seeing terminal illness portrayed with honesty and dignity rather than sentimentality or avoidance. Steve Harvey maintained contact with the Martinez family over the years, checking in periodically and continuing to support Rebecca's nonprofit work through his foundation. He spoke frequently about the lesson Daniel had taught him that we cannot control how much time we have, but we can control how we use the time we are given. He encouraged his audiences to consider what they would want to do if their time were suddenly limited, and to stop postponing those meaningful experiences until some indefinite future that might never arrive. 10 years after that March afternoon when Daniel Martinez walked onto the Family Feud stage with his family, the episode remained one of the most significant moments in the show's history. It had transcended its origin as a game show appearance and had become a cultural touchstone for conversations about mortality, priority setting, and the importance of creating meaningful experiences with the people we love. The episode proved that television could serve purposes beyond entertainment, that media platforms could be used to honor human dignity during vulnerable moments, and that choosing compassion over standard procedures could create impact far beyond what typical programming achieves. Rebecca reflected on that day frequently, particularly during difficult moments when grief felt overwhelming. She would remember Daniel's determination to participate despite his exhaustion, his insistence on saying, "I love you," when asked what he would want to tell his family, and his gratitude for having been able to create that final shared experience. Those memories sustained her during the hardest parts of grief and reminded her that Daniel's love had not ended with his death, but continued to shape their family's life in profound and lasting ways. The story of the Martinez family's appearance on Family Feud became more than just a memorable television moment. It became a reminder that acknowledging mortality does not diminish life, but rather intensifies our appreciation for the time we have. It demonstrated that creating meaningful experiences matters more than accumulating possessions or achievements. It showed that love expressed clearly and repeatedly provides the foundation that sustains families through loss. And it proved that sometimes the most important thing media can do is create space for authentic human experience, honoring people's reality rather than demanding performance or pretense. If this story has moved you, if you recognize the importance of prioritizing meaningful experiences and expressing love to the people who matter most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Daniel Martinez's courage in appearing on Family Feud during his final weeks carried a message that remains urgently relevant. We do not know how much time we have, but we can choose to use that time in ways that reflect our deepest values and our greatest loves. The moments we create with the people we love become the memories that sustain those who survive us. And the legacy we leave is not measured in accomplishments or acquisitions, but in the love we expressed, the values we modeled, and the courage we demonstrated in facing life's greatest challenges. Do not wait for the perfect moment to tell the people you love how much they matter. Do not postpone the experiences that would create meaningful memories. Daniel Martinez understood that time was his most precious and limited resource, and he chose to spend it creating one final joyful memory with his family. That choice, and Steve Harvey's compassionate response to it, created an impact that continues to inspire and transform lives more than a decade later.